Hello everybody and welcome to the fourth lesson of the training in gamification for the project Gamification, App Development and Project Management. Today we are going to talk about how to generate a gamified user experience. Apart from all the elements we have already talked about, we have to think about how are we going to combine them to generate a real experience in our users. First of all, let's think about real games. For instance, sports. When we think about football or basketball and we think about their basic elements, we will find that they are really similar. We have points, we have teams, we have balls, we have a certain movement, we have some rules, some limitation of time, of certain actions that you can't do, like touching the ball with your foot in basketball or with your hand in football. But the thing is that the experience is really different, right? It doesn't feel the same playing or watching a football match than playing or watching a basketball match. On the other hand, we can find that the experience of watching or playing a football match is really similar than the one we have when we are playing a video game which is designed after the football rules. For instance, FIFA. Why is this happening? Because there are a lot of elements which we call aesthetic that work together in order to generate the experience. We will have some recognizable elements like the players in this case, which are from the main leagues, main teams. We will have some skills that we already know that these characters have. We will have certain abilities that we have seen them playing in real life that we can use already. So even though the actions we are going to do, which go after pressing buttons and watching a screen and reacting to what happens in the screen, are really different from what we do when we are playing real sports, right? This is something we can use to create a gamified user experience when we are talking about our apps. If you remember, we were talking about the users of an application having to go through this called player journey, from onboarding to mastery, going through several states from newbie to enthusiasts, right? We depicted this as a ladder, and we talked previously about the possibility of users dropping off this journey in each of the stages. For instance, if a person is not very comfortable during the onboarding because it's not well explained what the application is going to offer, or if they realize that what the app is offering is not what they were expecting, they can leave after the onboarding. If they go on, they will be using our app regularly, and this was the moment at which we could start working on habit building, like having daily users or making them understand that they need our application in the case of those which are used in punctual moments, like, I don't know, an app that helps you with the accountment of your organization or something like that. So in this stage, we were talking about motivations. What should they find as rewards after their key actions in order to realize that the application is really offering some value. If they don't feel this value is offered, or if they feel bored or they find another alternative, they will never get to be enthusiasts. But it could happen that they continue using our app as regular, not enthusiasts, but regulars, or it could happen again that they abandon our app. What happens when we put some narrative over this structure? In this case, we will be talking about something really different and really motivating, which is the hero journey. We all have been told stories since we were really young kids about some people who started a journey of discovery, and after living some adventures and fighting some crises, got better at themselves and finally got what they expected to achieve. This is something we can work on to make our app experience, our user experience, more similar to a story. But then we have to talk about storytelling, okay? In stories, we start with an exposition of the situation and the characters, and we talk about, for instance, in this case, there's this young boy who is achieving to arrive to a castle, and there's always what we call an inciting incident, which means suddenly they receive some news of a kingdom that is far away, or about a princess who needs to be saved, or about a combat taking place in that castle or whatever. So this would be the incident that makes the hero want to start the journey. Then it starts what we call the rising action. The hero usually gets prepared for the journey. Sometimes they find allies on the way. Sometimes they have to gather some resources like weapons or supplies for the journey, food, water, horses, whatever. And after the journey has started, something happens. Some kind of crisis is going to test this hero and prove him in order to be the best version of himself. In this case, we see a dragon. But if we think about any kind of story we've been told, we know all kind of adventures, all kind of disappointments happen every day. This happens to us also when during our lives we are fired from a job, we are not accepted in the school we wanted to get into. Something happens and then we have to reframe our thoughts in order to get to this winning point, which is the climax. In this case, our hero has defeated the dragon. In real life, we could probably take a different decision to enhance our career in another path, or we probably met somebody who showed us there was another alternative. Something happens that gets us to what we feel is a climax point, a point when we feel satisfied, when we feel really proud of ourselves, and then we can start talking about ending, because in our cultures we are obsessed with happy endings. We don't want anything to finish until it has a happy ending coming. So this is something we can use to make the use of our application more interesting. We have to think about onboarding as an exposition and an opportunity to tell our users about an incident that will move them to this rising action in order to go on using our application and be favored by it, use our application help to win over the prizes and then get to the climax. If they feel they have arrived there, they would probably turn into enthusiasts. And even if they stop using the application because they no longer needed them, or they have I don't know, if it's a game, probably they went bored. If we are talking about other kind of applications, maybe they have already achieved what they were supposed to achieve, like in productivity applications, maybe they already um, made these behaviors natural, but probably their happy ending will include recommending our application to other people. This is part of why it's so important to think about storytelling when we are thinking about creating a gamified user experience. Another really important aspect of this storytelling is that the storyline might difference our application from any other competitor we have in the market. So here I have chosen an example that comes from gaming. It's a casual game which is called Gardenscapes, and the game itself is really simple. It's a casual game of this category called Match 3. It's the same kind of mechanics that we have in other really popular titles, such as Candy Crush, which was one of the most successful applications ever. So, how can you develop a game with these simple mechanics and launch it to the market when another product in the same category is so successful? Also, we are talking about social gaming, so the fact that our friends are already playing is encouraging people to play, because they will have some incentives. They could, if you remember when we were talking about virtual economies, they could trade elements that they will be needing in their gameplay. They will receive some help from friends. They could brag off with their scores. They could compare to each other in social leaderboards. So this is a really hard situation. How can you launch a successful product? What they have done here is creating an engaging storyline, which mixes these other really popular kind of games, of social games, that goes around the idea of getting an environment and embellish it, make it progress. So each time we win one of these levels, we don't only have the incentive that we have achieved the next level, or that we have won some coins, but we also have some stars we can exchange to do some actions in our garden. We are the owners of a beautiful house in a beautiful garden that it's has been abandoned for a lot of years and needs some actions to turn back to the luxury of the past. Here we have Austin, which is our ally in all the gameplay, and our little dog. We can name whatever we want, and they will be the ones who keep us motivated and tell us about all the things we can still do in our garden. So if a level is too challenging and it starts, remember the flow state, we'll start losing flow, we start feeling frustrated instead of motivating. Austin will be there to tell us, first of all, that we are able to do this. He is sort of a motivator. He always says he has faith in you. He always reminds you about your previous success. And also, he will have some tasks there for you in order to make you motivated. Remember, we talked about progress and completion. being a really powerful motivator. If we are just a level away to restore a full zone of our garden, we would be less eager to abandon this game than if we don't have any other motivation there. So here, the storytelling works as an extra motivator, but also as a way of making the game different from the others in the market. In fact, their developers have just launched the second part, which goes also with the same characters, but instead of restoring the garden, we will be restoring Austin's family's old house. So it's the same mechanics, it's sort of the same motivations. Uh, Aesthetic is really similar from the previous title, but we have a new story that we can start again. Because something that stories have is that after one story, we are always looking for the next one. Remember when we were little and we were asking the adults around us to tell us a story before bedtime, and after they finished, we wanted another one, or how we watched the Disney films and we could never get enough. We want another one and another one. So here, users are engaged and create sort of a virtual relationship with the characters involved in the story. Another amazing example of how can you use this to separate your application from all the others around is Zombies Run. There are a lot of applications out there that are supposed to motivate us to keep fit, to exercise ourselves, and they all have the same kind of mechanics and the same kind of rewards. They give us, mainly they give us feedback about our performance. They let us compare our performance with others. Sometimes it's people around us, sometimes it's people we don't know, but they have some things in common, like being in the same city or being having, like, for instance, similar records. Remember when we talked about leaderboards and we were saying that we can use levels to make the competition more interesting. Some of them even include rewards from real life. There's We feature there that gives us points that we can afterwards exchange for some discounts or gifts from sports shops. So if we want to launch an application in this environment, what can we do? We are really limited. Something that hadn't been done before was introducing the fitness practice into a completely different story. They created this gamified experience in which you will be running, no, or walking or jogging, as the first picture says, and you will be doing as you usually do it, listening to some music, of course, watching your performance and hoping to be better than the previous time. But they included an extra motivator, which is the fact that you are running to escape from zombies. They have some storylines and some sound effects that mix with the music you're listening to. So for instance, you are running around the block and it's like, okay, watch out, because after the next crossing you will find a zombie. So you have to do this sprint in this time in order to not be caught. Apart from that, you could also collect some virtual resources after you complete some exercises or If you go through a different path, you will find some supplies which are important to defend your base. These were the times of The Walking Dead, the TV series, being at their most successful moment. So this application had a lot of downloads and a lot of users that changed what would have been their natural choices, like the applications of their sneaker brands, their sports clothing, because Adidas, Nike, all of them have similar applications. But nothing compares to the excitement and the sense of adventure you have when you are running for your life, not only to lose some weight, right? Again, if you have being worried about your productivity, you have probably realized that there are a lot of different methods and applications that are meant to help us with this, to develop productive habits and routines that help us with our performance in our careers, our studies, etc. One of these methods, which is really popular because it's really simple to implement, it's the Pomodoro technique. The Pomodoro technique blocks you from doing anything than your main task for the following 25 minutes. A lot of applications have been launched to do some Pomodoros. Some of them are simply timers. You could set the timer of your phone in 25 minutes, but these applications do it for you and collect some feedback on your productivity during each of these periods, or tell you about some motivation tips, or they are combined with some mindfulness exercises to improve your focus. There are a lot of different resources, and there are a lot of competitors, and most of them are quite the same. We couldn't say there was a leader in this category. Also, there are not only applications but browser extensions that you can install to block your browser and stop you from compulsory checking your social networks or something like that. But one of these applications has thought about a different way of telling you about this. The mechanism is the same. You put the application into work, and you are supposed to focus during the time you have promised to, and the application will stop you from checking your phone, because if you, as you see in the picture, each time you compromise to start a productivity period, you say, okay, I'm focusing now, and you plant a tree. What happens then? After some time, you will probably be tempted to check your phone. But when you look at your phone, you will find this, a wonderful little tree which is growing as you're working and not checking your phone. The longer you stay without touching your phone, the bigger the tree will grow. And here we have something that is weird in gamification, because as we have said, we work with positive psychology, so we work more with rewards than with punishments. But here there's some punishment. If you leave the app, which is something you will need to do if you want to check anything in your phone, this beautiful little tree will be killed. So, of course, this is only a story, and this is nothing that really links you to a real forest. But the thing is that people are more motivated if they feel this little tree depends on them than if they are simply seeing some counter telling them they have to still focus for 10 minutes. So this little story, which is really simple, this tiny element, which is, as you see, not a really difficult thing to design, can make our application much more effective. Apart from that, Forest has done something which is really interesting, which is linking their usage with real life forests. If we use the application, I think I'm not really sure if it's depending on the number of users or in the number of hours it is used, but they have the compromise to plant some real life trees. They donate some money, so in some places in Africa where deforestation is a really huge problem, and also there are a lot of unemployed people who need some job to do, they have started hiring people there to plant some trees in the name, on behalf of the users of the application. So what they have done here, they have put some serious fun on it. If you remembered when we talked about the different kinds of fun that Nicole Lazzaro had detected, we talked about having a meaning, having a purpose, apart from the feeling of playing, that improved motivation and improved retention. This is what they have done here. They have asked people to use the application not only because of their selfish goal to improve their own productivity, not only because it's cute, because the little fake tree will keep growing, but also because they are helping real people in real life and the environment of the planet we'll live in. Here we find another really interesting example because it has to do with something that it's usually the less interesting part of an application, which is learning how to use it. If you are very young, you might not remember Clippy, but Clippy was the assistant in Microsoft Office since their earlier versions. And when most of the users of Office were not really used to these technologies to process their text or their data, they had, apart from the onboarding, the natural onboarding process that we still have to learn, like how specifically is this done, they had a really important problem there, which was that a lot of people didn't thought about all the possibilities the program, the software, the Office suite was offering. So this little paperclip appeared and transformed itself into a lot of different objects like a bicycle or something like that to catch your attention. And after they had caught your attention, it would suggest you, okay, so apparently you are writing a letter. Do you want me to help you with that? Because with the introduction of ICT, a lot of standards change. So Clippy helped us to know where should we put the addresses, information, some salutations that were more appropriate than others. And after that, it could even suggest you to if you were doing a massive mailing, to combine the data on an Excel sheet with the document you were already working in, So the fields will be combined, and you could write to a lot of people and personalize the letter, something that now seems like really common and really standard, but it wasn't at the beginning of the usage of Microsoft Office. Um, the feeling about Clippy was not unanimous. Some people really liked it and appreciated it, but for most people, let's be honest here, it was a distraction. It was an extra feature that occupied some extra space in our computers, and we didn't have much space, so we hated it and we wanted to uninstall it. But the fact is that it was a really, really useful feature because it took the onboarding to another level. They, with this assistant, they will help us to improve our mastery continuously, and each time we had a new need. This was a really intelligent application. They could detect what we were doing, or they could answer to questions. Again, this is something that now Siri does spontaneously and we find natural, but it wasn't some years ago. And we could ask how to do something that we thought it could be maybe possible, but we didn't know how to do, or we had never done before. And Clippy here was a really interesting ally to help us develop our abilities. So what did Microsoft do to deal with this lack of appreciation of such a useful feature? After some versions of Office had launched and the target of the application had changed a lot, and they were dealing mostly with digital natives and or people that had been using Microsoft Office for a lot of years, they designed this little game in which Clippy went through a lot of adventures in order to make people discover all the things they could do with the suite. This is not part of Office anymore, but it was an independent feature that was available on their help page to help with the feeling that this was some extra thing that nobody needed and nobody had asked for. They designed it by demand. People would choose if they were going to use it or not. And the funny thing is that after people having been so disgusted with Clippy and the assistant and hating it so much, this tutorial, because it's a learning product, was so popular that it is still available to download in the Microsoft Web because people loved the game of Clippy. So if we design some interesting story, if we design some really funny challenges, some different stages, we could get our users to be so involved in the learning of our application that they could still get to this point and demand it only because it's fun. Of course, this could distract them from the main focus, which is the use of our application, the use of Microsoft Office in this case. But it's a really interesting initiative that we could think about when we want to design the way people are going to be introduced to our application and the things they can do with it. Aesthetic is composed by a lot of elements. In this slide, I include a link that takes you to this set of cards. It might be familiar because They're from Victor Manrique and Isidro Rodrigo, which are two Spanish experts in gamification, and they had this first deck of cards that were designed to make people interested in playing with the different components of games, of gamification, sorry, from turns to challenges, quests, etc. This set of cards was really successful, and after some time they designed also this gamification aesthetics color wheel. From my opinion, this has a very technological component. They talk about things like camera, for instance, which are not really useful for a lot of gamification projects, especially when we are not talking about designing serious games or something like that, but only to include some gamification elements in a totally different application, as would probably be your case. But they have a lot of elements you can think about, and I will first of all encourage you to think about the theme, because sometimes changing something as simple as the theme of your application would probably change the whole experience your users are having with it. We have seen some cases like Forest or Zombies Run. Let's go through some more. Let's start, as I was saying, with the theme. Here you see Habitica. This is an application that it's a task manager, nothing else. Of course, it has some really different features, like the fact that you can cooperate with others in order to get through some challenges, which keeps social pressure working. But the most significant element is their aesthetic. They work as an RPG, and so you choose your character, you earn some rewards in the terms of the virtual economy. They have some coins you can buy rewards with. You can set, in fact, your own rewards, which is something really interesting if you want to experiment with your own motivation extractor. And apart from that, you get some random collectibles that are those pets and mounts that you can see here in the first and third avatar. They have avatars, they have these backgrounds in which you can put your avatar around. And if you look at it, it has an 8-bit aesthetic. What's the matter? I've been using this application with my students for a while, and almost every group I have the same first feeling. This is for kids. I'm not interested in this. So we have to be careful, because some aesthetics that can be really appealing for some users can as well demotivate other users. Here we see a very similar example, but in this case it's much simpler. It's WISA. It's they call it an emotional wellness bot, which means that they will help you with artificial intelligence to, as you can see in the next images, to organize your thoughts, manage your stress, definitely to improve your state of mind by working with some techniques, very basic psychological techniques that are really effective to face some stress situations, some negative thoughts, some wrong ways of thinking. When we think, for instance, that we are the worst and everything bad is going to happen to us, they help us being less catastrophic. But if you look at this, Waisa is this little penguin, and when you chat with it, it answers you with some very cute gifs. This is very appropriate if we want some teenagers to use our application, which is a decision that makes a lot of sense because a lot of youngsters don't get access to proper psychological treatment, or in fact, they are not willing to accept help from these professionals. But if we want a high executive to use WISA to manage the stress situations in his or her daily life, we'd probably think after the first cute animal sending hugs that WISA is not for them. So watch out with the iconography you are using because it can appeal and expel as well some users. You can also work with perspective. Gamification has the possibility to generate immersive experiences, as we talked about in the first lesson, and it can be really interesting to generate engagement, to change our way of thinking, to reframe our thoughts, as we have seen in WISA, to empathize with others, as used in a lot of serious games regarding social injustice or stigmas like mental health. In this case, we see this is a serious game for training into how to face Ebola situations. And they have worked with both first person and third person perspective to compare the performance of their users. Sometimes it's really effective to try to make people feel part of the situation. Sometimes it's better to give them the possibility to get away of the situation and to have a more objective point of view. For instance, if we think about traffic applications, we already have a first person perspective because we are driving. So the interesting thing here is to play with the perspectives of other drivers or other users of the streets, such as people that want to cross the streets or the rest of the drivers around us. Or even with a global perspective that will help us to understand how is our behavior in comparison to others. So think about perspective. Which perspective is most adequate for the goals you have and the kind of experience you want to generate in your users? And to finish this lesson, I'm going through some elements that are not usually taken into consideration but can be very helpful. And I have some examples that are not gamified applications. First of all, we have this, which is taboo. We call it like this in Spanish. I'm not sure if it's the same name all across Europe. It's a game in which there are some cards with definitions, well, not with words, and the objective is to make a definition that the other part of your team will understand and get them to the keyword, and doing so without using some keywords which are reflected in these cards. If you have, of course, a limitation of time, and if you use one of these words, somebody will be in charge of pushing this button here, which makes a horrible noise like "Wah," and it's really disgusting for everybody. Sound works like this. If you think about video games, Almost all of them have really epic intro epic music for their introductions, because they want you to feel immersed in the story. Also, we were talking about productivity some slides ago. If we think about a counter, it's not the same pressure we feel if we hear that counter, like tick tick tack, right? So sometimes noise can be a really simple resource and can help making people feel the urge when they have time limitations, or to be more aware of their fails. For instance, there's another really popular game which is called Operation Surgery, in which you play a doctor and you have to take out the bone or the organ without touching anything. And again, when you touch the rest of the body, you hear because sirens make us aware of our moves. So think if there would be any kind of sound that will help your users feel more involved in the experience. For instance, a lot of meditation applications include nature sounds to facilitate the experience of meditating. And of course, we are talking about aesthetics, so we shouldn't forget the most basic elements like shapes, colors, or even fonts. Probably you have seen this image that has circulated a lot throughout the net. Comic Sans is one of the fonts most hated. People associate them with, again, with children, with lack of professionality. So here's some signs in an office, unofficial signs, the kind of message we print to tell our coworkers to please stop leaving the door opened, and the response, which is don't use Comic Sans. We are a Fortune 500 company, not a lemonade stand. This is something that happens. And as well as I was saying with the case of Abitica, if we use some cartoons, people will think we are targeting kids. And if we use these kind of letters, these kind of fonts, we might seem unprofessional. On the other hand, sometimes the fonts can help us transmitting a message. For instance, if we want people to understand the world from their kids' point of view, to make them the green conscience increase, for instance, it would be really useful to use this kind of calligraphy that reminds people of kids. Definitely. The thing is, you have a lot of elements, and all of them will sum up in the end to generate the complete experience of your users. So please be aware of all of them and how are you going to use them.